Some critics call it don't ask, don't tell for criminals. But Mayor de Blasio recently signed the Fair Chance Act into law after the New York City Council overwhelmingly approved the legislation with a 45-5 vote. Brooklyn Councilmember Jumaane Williams sponsored the proposal with the aim of leveling the field for all job seekers by prohibiting employers from asking about criminal history before making a conditional job offer.
Well, will this new law offer a leg up for ex-offenders? How will it impact Brooklynites on both sides of the employment equation? Paul Keefe is Associate Counsel for the Community Service Society New York and the main legal advocate behind the Fair Chance Act. Welcome.
Thank you
for being here. And we're also joined by Brandon Holmes, a civil rights organizer at Vocal New York. Thank you for being here. So there's one thing I kind of want to clear up, because everyone is like, oh, they did time. You can be a convicted felon without having done time, right?
Sure.
And those are the people that this act is trying to help.
Well, it helps
Yes?
anyone with a criminal record.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter whether you did time or not. If you have a record, they can't ask about it until the conditional job offer.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Don't they normally ask if you've been convicted of a felony? I feel like that's what I've always seen. I feel like I don't see I've ever seen on a job application like, oh, have you ever been convicted of a misdemeanor?
Well, what employers usually ask is, have you been convicted of a crime? And in New York, that's a felony or a misdemeanor.
Okay.
And that's right on the job application for the most part. So what exactly does the Fair Chance Act, now law, stipulate?
You can't have it on the application anymore. Ads that say no felons, criminal background check required, those things can't be on the ads anymore. And basically, to the last stage of the employment process, an employer can't ask about someone's record, they can't do a background check behind their back or anything like that. They have to wait until they've selected that person from all the people applying, and then they can ask the question.
I see. So isn't there already legislation protecting people from being discriminated against because of their past?
There is, and that was a big reason why this law was so important, is we had that law saying you can't deny someone a job just because they have a record. But if you're asked from the jump, do you have a record or not, and you get 100 people applying for a job, you can whittle some of those down just by looking at that question.
Sure.
So Brandon, you're working day in and day out with people who this is affecting from the get-go when they walk into the interview. So we had the legislation already on the books. Do you think that this is going to make a greater impact than the laws that were already there?
This is definitely going to make a much greater impact. And primarily that's because a lot of times people get discouraged when they see that box on the application and they believe that as soon as they check that off, they've already lost their opportunity. And this is going to, as we call it, the Fair Chance Act, it's going to give them a fair chance to be viewed equally just like every other applicant who doesn't have a record.
So are people really facing problems? Like you're working with Vocal New York. Is this one of the issues that people are returning again and again with? Because you guys help with housing and medical things and also jobs. I guess once you get housing and your medical situation aligned, the job is the one thing that you can still be rejected for again and again.
Yep, and jobs, especially for people who are formerly incarcerated, that is one of the biggest issues because that's one of the barriers that keeps them from being able to maintain their housing or maintain their health care. And the reason we see such a high rate of people returning to prison is because they can't work and they're not fully re-entering society because they can't get their housing, they can't put food on the table, they can't provide for their families, so they have to resort to other means. This is just a way that they can legally get back into the workforce, they can become a part of our communities just like everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, you can't do that without a job, and you can't do that without a fair chance, no pun intended. But how do you really know that, you know, as before the act, how could you really know if someone is discriminating against you because, you know, you're a former, I don't know, offender, I want to use like the right word. I don't want to put anybody down, because if you've paid your debt to society, it should be over, I think.
Yeah, and that's one of the main problems the Act tries to solve, is once you offer someone a job, that means that you haven't looked into their record at all, and you've engaged with them and evaluated their skills and what they would bring to the job. And so all of that good stuff comes first, and then you talk about the negative characteristics, and then the employer's in a much better position to balance those two things.
So what kind of enforcement is included with the law?
So it's an amendment to the City Human Rights Law, which means that it affects 4 or more employers with 4 or more employees. And you can bring a case in court if you're discriminated against because of your record. You can also file a complaint with with the City Commission on Human Rights.
Now, are there specific sort of kinds of jobs or specific like entire fields of work, like you can never be our money manager or you can't work with children? Is there like different lanes where even this law won't apply?
Yeah, so this law has two exceptions, and one of them is for law enforcement agencies. So, and those are all sort of public government jobs. And then also for any kind of job where a law already says you can't hire someone with a certain conviction.
Okay.
And so there's around 50 laws out there, state laws, and there's city laws as well, that have particular exemptions for people, and they're tailored to a crime. But once an employer has discretion, if there's no law preventing them from hiring someone with a record, then they have to use the Fair Chance Act.
Okay, but then what's to prevent employers from just doing a background check anyway? They've got
happy
enough.
fingers on Google.
I mean, you've got enough information. You know, you both know how much information you can get for the bargain price of $19.99.
Right.
You know what I mean? On all of these sites where you could just search and put in a credit card number. What's to stop them from just going that route?
Well, there's nothing to stop them now, but it would be a violation of the law for them to do that.
Okay.
And really, the good part about the Fair Chance Act is it doesn't change employers' practices right now, because they usually wait till later in the process anyway, because they don't want to pay that $19.99 for everyone who comes through their door.
Right, right.
So then on your side, Brandon, if folks are walking into the office and they say, you know what, I think it might have been going well, like I met the guy or woman one time, but then it got a little weird, and I think there might have been a little thing, like they might have, or maybe even alluded to a record that they might have. What do you guys do when that kicks in?
Well, there are plenty of reentry organizations across New York City that we are also in contact with and partnership with, such as Fortune Society, Osborne Association, and they do specific job training on how people who are formerly incarcerated or currently on parole can handle job interviews and how they can navigate around those kinds of questions that employers try to pull.
So when the person walks in and says, all right, I think that they got me, they know that that I have a conviction in the past, and I think that I may have been discriminated against then, what do you instruct them to do after that?
We would definitely tell them, you know, continue with the interview process, continue with the whole application process, and as the Fair Chance Act says, it's after the conditional job offer that they can then run the background check. So if you do receive that offer and then they want to take that offer back, they have to present in writing in court why they believe that whatever your crime was would keep you from properly conducting your job. Yep.
Gotcha. So then, on your side, Paul, if someone goes through that process and they say, you know, it's all candidates considered equal is the kind of thing, and they say, I'm just looking to knock off somebody. If I just put off the person who had a criminal record, am I breaking the law now just because I got 3 great people in front of me? They all have the same sort of thing, but that was just the weed out for that guy. So all of a sudden, am I the criminal for saying no to the person who has the record?
Well, you wouldn't be a criminal. You would be liable under the city human rights law. But what the law requires is that the employer give the person a written explanation why there's a direct relationship or an unreasonable risk, which is the language from the current law that's been on the books since 1976. Yeah. And so they have to go through all 8 factors and and show that they considered how old the conviction was and the person's age at the time and how serious it was. And then they have to give the person 3 days to respond to that. And the reason why that's so important is we want the employers and employees to talk about this stuff. Because what the research shows us is that once people sit down and you stop looking at someone as having a robbery conviction, but as someone that you met and you know that they just took this program that's going to help them on the job, then you can balance those things. And the other thing that the law requires is that the person be given a copy of whatever background check is being used, because it can be some kind of 1999 fly-by-night website, and maybe the person has a common name, and there's someone else out there with a legitimate conviction, but it's not the person that's sitting in front of the employer.
Interesting. So how is this being received by employers then? Because I could imagine someone, let's say, running a small business and saying
4 people or more.
Yeah, 4
employees.
people. Yeah, and I don't want to take that risk on, and I didn't know. What's the response to them?
Well, as we've been saying, a lot of independent businesses are arguing that, you know, they don't want to take that risk on, like you said, but there are already laws in place that try to fight job discrimination. This is just something that makes it more difficult for the businesses to discriminate against somebody because it postpones that background check until the end of the process.
I mean, I think it's complicated because I feel like there are so many ways that people try to figure things out.
Yeah.
Like, I've been on job interviews where people are trying to figure out if I have children.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're feeling me out. They know the right questions to ask. Like, how do we kind of bridge that gap of like business and understanding what society is and understanding how the two work together? I mean, what's the solution?
Well, we met with a lot of employers before this bill was passed, and members of the chambers of commerce in all 5 boroughs. And they understood what the law requires, and they didn't give us much opposition to the Fair Chance Act, but what they asked for is employer education, and I think that's a big role for the City Human Rights Commission to come in, do something like they did with paid sick leave, and really make a public push about it.
Okay, so where do you guys see this going?
I believe this is going to be monumental for New York City, and our next step with Vocal and our Fair Chance Coalition, we want to take this to the state level. There are plenty of other states who have passed some type of ban the box or fair chance legislation, and that's our next step. We're going to go up to Albany and bring the fight there.
So as you were drafting these laws and working with the council member, how many people do you think real-world impact in New York City that this could sort of open the door for better access to employment for?
Tens of thousands of people.
Tens of thousands of people
Yeah,
right now
absolutely.
as we sit here.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I mean, I feel like if people paid their debt to society, they need a fair shot to get back in there and work and be able to pay your rent and buy food and just do the basics. So I think this is a step in the right direction.
All right, we'll be watching. How many days until it's the law?
A law.
October 27th, so
right.
120 days from when de
signing.
Blasio signed it. Yeah.
All right, the clock is ticking.
Yep.
Good
Thanks for
stuff.
coming by.
Thank
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.